Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present virtually in CIES 2023. Both Anu and I are sorry to not be there in person, but thanks for engaging with our work in our absence. This is our presentation for embodied childhoods of, across, beyond, place, and time. We always begin with the land and culture acknowledgement. Arizona State University is located in Indian country. There are 22 tribal nations in Arizona. ASU's campuses are situated on the homelands of many indigenous peoples, including the Akimel, Otham, and Peeposh. Arizona State University recognizes the original inhabitants of these lands and recognizes that they still reside throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. We acknowledge that the modern-day indigenous nations that descended from the ancestral peoples are the original inhabitants of this land. And Anu is from East Stroudsburg University, which honors the Lenape on whose sacred land it stands. It acknowledges that the university is a guest on the original homeland of the living nations of the Delaware Nation, the Delaware Tribe, the Stockbridge Munsee community, the Seneca Cayuga Nation, and others. ESU extends its respect to many indigenous people who call these lands home. We commit ourselves to preserving the indigenous land we inhabit. ESU entered into a partnership with the Delaware Tribe to provide education around Native American culture. And we do this because it reminds us in all the work that we do that there are indigenous knowledges and ways of being that allow us to do this work today, and that it's our job to respectfully engage with these knowledges and these ways of knowing in our work. What we're presenting today is about our dissertations revisited. So a news dissertation was conducted in the United States in a preschool in 2016 and 2017. Anu used participatory ethnographic approaches and an arts-based curriculum. And she saw children as co-researchers and also practiced reflexivity in her research. My research was in Brazil in a one-room multi-grade schoolhouse in 2018 and 2019. I used multi-species ethnographic approaches, including an arts-based data generation method. Children were co-researchers in my project as well. I focused on decentering the human and seeing relationships instead of the human being as the center of everything. My analysis was a diffractive analysis, which I followed the data where it led me. And then I also rewrote part of my dissertation in the form of a speculative fable where I reimagined all of that data as a fable. What we're doing in this project is to revisit all of that work across space and time with a new question and a new framework. The research question this time around is, how does an elemental framework allow us to see embodied childhoods of, across, beyond, place, and time? And we're using the same data sources, our field notes, children's journals, a world book that Anu developed in her dissertation, this passport activity that she used. We had informal and formal interviews and walking conversations with children in the more than human world. We also did classroom activities, and there were thousands of photos and videos and soundscapes, and we're revisiting that data with a new framework. We're calling it an elemental framework, and it's based on the notion that everything in the universe is made up of 5 basic elements, which are referred to as pancha bhutas, includes all living beings, objects, and nature. And despite apparent differences, the core of everything is a pancha bhuta, and Anu will describe this now.
The 5 elements, pancha bhutas. According to Hinduism, the universe consists of the 5 gross elements referred to as pancha bhutas. These elements are space or akash, air or vayu, fire or agni, water or jal, and earth, prithvi, which are represented in everything and form the basis of life everywhere. For example, if we examine a plant and a rock, one is inanimate and the other is a living organism. However, despite their apparent difference, both have evolved from the same 5 elements or bhutas. A specific configuration of these elements forms a rock, while the same elements with a different configuration can evolve into a living organism. The only difference is that each represents a unique configuration of these elements. Our embodied lived experience demonstrate the presence of these 5 elements. It should be noted that English translation of these elements from Sanskrit words may refer to common objects of our daily experience and knowledge. However, they do connote a much wider and deeper meaning. For example, air or vayu is one of the elements, but it not only refers to the air as we experience daily, it also represents the breath we take and the respiratory system in the living beings. Some of you may have even experienced that after doing yoga practice of breathing techniques, referred commonly as pranayam, how it energizes us. This practice connects and enlivens the element of air in our bodies. The second element is water or jal. It is not only the water as we know it in our daily lived experience, but is also present in the form of blood and other body fluids in living beings. And in its transformed form, we see it as moisture, fog, steam, and many other things in nature. The third element is fire or agni, which we experience in the form of real fire. However, its presence is also evident in the form of bodily temperature of all beings or other objects in the environment, such as heat and thermodynamics that operates within living beings. The fourth element is earth, which is present in the form of the body mass or physical structure. We can relate to it in our bodies in the form of bones, body tissue, and muscles in the living organisms, and gross mass as seen in inanimate objects. The space is the fifth element, which accounts for the space where everything takes place. These 5 basic elements can be found in all objects and forms and beings in the universe in multiple varying configurations. The presence of these 5 elements is across space and time. When children interact with the world around them, their embodied experiences are with the same elements with different configurations. Associated with these basic elements are their intrinsic qualities, and these qualities are not limited to, but include movement, ability to change form, blending with other elements to create new forms, energy to cross boundaries, while at the same time fit into the shape of the context. We examine children's meaning making through this lens to understand their experiences connected to the 5 basic elements or the bhutas.
So just as Anu said, we're paying attention to the properties or the qualities of the bhutas and using that as a lens through which we can see how children are reconfiguring those elements, and in doing so, reconfiguring themselves. This quote here is from the Afrofuturist Octavia E. Butler in Parable of the Sower. She says, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." We pay attention to this change and how it changes us across place and time. So like I said, we're calling this an elemental analysis. We revisited our data collectively through this lens of the elemental framework. We started by first listing the properties of the elements and then using those properties as a way to see the data anew. And so we took, just for this example, the property of water, and we invite you to do this with us. 2 properties of water are that it flows and that it's boundless, and we'll illustrate that for you now. This is boundless flow. This image is from one of the world books of one of Anu's participants. And in the picture, it says, "This is planet Earth. This is our planet. This is Madagascar. This is Pennsylvania. This is Coopersburg, where I live." The child also stated to Anu that she wants to go to Madagascar to see lemurs, but she'll have to go by plane because it's very far. This is an example of a child who was watching a television show, and then became curious about Madagascar, and then brought that curiosity to the classroom, and then drew this, and then brought Anu into the story by explaining it, and now brings you into the story by explaining it again. You can see through the boundless flow that this was a connection that this child made that went across space and time, place and time, to reach us now, where we can reimagine how our own creative interactions with culture, with film, connect us across place and time. In this other example on the left, you see a picture from Anu's work, and on the right, you see a picture from my work. Both include blocks. And on the left, this is the Minecraft world. This student played Minecraft at home and came into the school with the idea of building a Minecraft world. On the right, he's building a computer for our research. And this was on the day that I introduced everyone to the research we were doing together. And so these two children are taking blocks and creating new worlds with these blocks, so that those elements that make up the blocks and make up the classroom and make up the children are turning into new things like computers and Minecraft. On the left is a picture of a flower from Brazil. I was sitting on a downed tree with a child while she waited for her brother to pick her up from school, and she drew a flower in the dust with a stick, and then she went over to the bush and she took some flowers from it to give it cheeks and some hair, and she made a smile out of grass. And on the right is a constellation that one of the students in the new study drew. And this is the image, The Treachery of Images. This is not a pipe, from the 1900s. And we have this here to explain that in the same way that this is not a pipe because it's a picture of a pipe, it is a pipe because it's a picture of a pipe. So with this in mind, when we look at this flower drawn in dust, created from flowers, we can see how this child, who's made of stardust, is reconfiguring the earth that's also made of ancient stardust into a new flower from an old flower. When you see this through the lens of water that has boundless flow, you can see how this life of these flowers evolves and shifts shape over time. And for the child that drew this flower, it was just passing time waiting for her brother. And the flower reaches us now years later across space, across time, so that we can also consider how we're all made of stardust and how we can shift shape at any time and control the changes that we see in ourselves. So it's an idea that we can reconfigure ourselves, or that we are reconfigured by the elements. It's the same thing with the constellation that this child drew. It's a reminder that we're all made of stardust, that we're all flying through the universe, and that it's our ability, that we have the unique ability to try and comprehend and feel how we are shifting shape across space and time, with that gift of seeing our elements as boundless and flowing, just like water. Here's another example. This is wood that used to be a tree that is now a picture of wood. On this day, the children saw this wood during their recess, and they turned it into motorcycles, and they were running around the schoolyard on motorcycles. So for that moment, they became drivers and they were riding motorcycles. But here we are now looking at a picture of wood that used to be a tree that was also a motorcycle. When we see our relationships this way, we can see how that matter is shifting shape and how we are reconfigured when we hear and experience the story of children playing with wood to become motorcycles. We can see how using this lens of water that flows and water that's boundless can help us see multiple worlds and stories from the same picture. Just like this one, a picture of a dog at the school. The children could use the camera at any time to take any pictures that they'd like. And this is a picture that they took of a dog that visited us at school. And then they started playing with the camera settings to change the color of the picture. So within this one story, you can see how the children are taking a picture of what's in their world and changing it in the moment so that it becomes something new. They're flowing and they're boundless in the way that they play with this dog. They're not just playing with the dog, they're playing with the camera. And the dog's not just there, it's with us here. So there's this boundless flow across time and space from this one image, of this one interaction, of this one story of this dog. So how does this elemental framework allow us to see embodied childhoods of, across, beyond place and time? We've talked so far about this reconfiguration, but we need to focus a little bit more on how we have these embodied experiences. So this framework illustrates children's embodied experiences in the ways that children reconfigure the elements, and in doing so, reconfigure themselves. And by telling those stories and sharing those stories together, we too are invited to reconfigure ourselves, even though it's years later, across geographical locations and across time. This process highlights the intrinsic characteristics of the elements. We highlighted water for this one, as they're reflected within and beyond the children. And we're asking you today to think about how those same properties of water, of it being boundless and having flow, are reflected in you and your own relationships, so that you can see new configurations that emerge across space and time. Our next steps in this work are to seek feedback on the framework. We're continuing our analysis with the other pancha, the other elements, and we're starting to write a journal article that's in prep for educational researcher. So we're certainly interested in hearing your thoughts about this work. If you're interested in reading some other materials that we've written from this work, my dissertation is called What Matters in Education Beyond the Human, Learning as Sympoetic Story Worlding. And a news dissertation is called World Through the Eyes of Children, a qualitative study of preschool children understanding the world. And then I also published another article called Keepers of the Night Stories from this same work, in case you're interested in reading it. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present virtually. It really means a lot to us. And we hope that you'll reach out to both of us by email so you can share your feedback and we can have a conversation with you, even though we weren't able to be there today. Thanks so much.